Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. So today it's Guineith. Tomorrow, Rich Sheben and I will be live on Thanksgiving Day. And Friday it'll be just me. And I'll be talking about tips from the book. And if you'd like to call in, you're certainly welcome to do that. I have this feeling that very little progress has been made in us teaching people about how to do things. Have they actually, I know people are listening, I know that, but have they actually acted upon any of the information that they've heard here? Maybe for the first time. Maybe we've repeated things that they've heard before. Has anyone acted on it? I don't think our success rate is very high. As a matter of fact, I think it's 0. So if you have learned something, if you have benefited, I'd love to hear it. If you haven't, I'd love to hear that as well. I would. So the number, if you'd like to call today or on Friday, the number is 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Welcome, Guineith. Guineith, are you there?
I'm here.
Me? Great. Yep, we can hear you. Yeah, we can hear you. Great. So, Guineith, one of the things that we were going to talk about is something that many people may not want to hear about. That's the thought that there are past lives. Dr. Norm Shealy believes that there are past lives. He knows who he was without a shadow of a doubt. And in his past lives, and some of the people that he's been were wonderful and some not so good. And he believes that, if you have ills and health problems, that can be attributed to some unfinished business in a previous life. So I was invited by Dr. Shealy to come on over to his chapel. And on his farm, he has a magnificent chapel. It's the kind of place that is so pristine, so magnificent, that you wouldn't find this on a farm, probably anywhere in the country, other than his farm. And it's the kind of place where you take your shoes off and you just wear stocking feet to walk around in the chapel. It's magnificent in every respect. And so I went to his chapel, and there's many rooms in this building, and there was a reclining chair. There was a videographer there, and they videoed my past life regression. And Dr. Shealy put me into a hypnotic trance. And first of all, I need to say that if you don't want to be hypnotized, you can resist it, and you won't be hypnotized. But if you want to be, you can be. You can be put into this state of relaxation, and you are hypnotized. And I was. I've been hypnotized twice in my life, once on stage and once with Dr. Shealy. And the experience was, he led me to think about the past. And I saw myself as a farmer, a villager, And it appeared to be during the period of the First Revolutionary War. And, my clothing was Spartan. It was nothing to brag about. It looked old and worn. And I tried to warn the villagers, the men, and there were only about 5 that I was in contact with from the farms around our farm. And I'm not sure exactly where this farm was, but it was, kind of like our farm here in Missouri, in the middle of nowhere. And I was talking with the fellow villagers, just a few guys, maybe 5. And I said, look, I'm paraphrasing. They're five villages away, and they're coming our way. The path of destruction is headed right toward us. There is mayhem. There is murder. There's killing. And the enemy is coming our way. And they're 4 villages away, then 3 villages away, then they're 2 villages away, and then 1, and we're next. We can resist. We can cause these guys problems. We can be the equivalent of guerrilla warriors and really mess up their plans. We can fight back. We don't have to give them our pigs, our cows, and our chickens, and our horses. We don't have to let them burn down our village, our farmhouses. We don't have to let them rape our ladies. We don't have to let them kill our sons and our parents and grandparents. And I could not get anyone to do anything other than walk away from me and hide. And that was it. It's all on video. It's not for public consumption. So when it was all over, I saw myself looking down, as maybe a bird's eye view. I saw myself in a field. And this was after all the destruction. This was after the revolution, if it was a revolution. It was after all the conflict, the mayhem. And I saw myself worn out. I had more years of wear on me than I had years on me. I was more hunched over. I was more worn. I was more ragged. It was just me in the field. I did not see my death. I just saw me walking through the field, worn out, as a guy who could have, would have, should have, but couldn't, because I couldn't get anybody else to cooperate. I could not get anybody else to pay attention. So, as I think about this, and I've thought about it many times, was it a past life regression, or am I looking at the future? Was I looking at the future? Was I a failure in my past life, as I feel I am now, or am I looking at my future failures? And literally, I am unable to get people to pay attention, to see right what's in front of them, and act on it. I'm unable to do it. Literally unable. It'll be okay. It'll get better. And it's not getting better. IBM, International Business Machines, used to be the greatest powerhouse in computing in the world. I'm talking about in the 1960s and 70s. I used to work on IBM computers, mainframes, and super mini computers. They're laying off 10,000 people in Europe in their cloud computing division right now. That's 20% of their workforce. IBM was a blue chip stock. IBM was a bellwether of what was to come. Well, if they're still a bellwether, laying off 20% of their workforce is a big deal. 10,000 people being laid off, that's 20% of their workforce. I remember my dad saying to me, "Hey, Vin, I just graduated the university. I had a bachelor's in finance and economics." He said, "Vin, you should work for IBM, big company like that. Get in there, grow with the company, security, stability. And I remember saying to my dad, Dad, they're laying off 1,500 people a week. Now it's 10,000. So I'm just digressing a little bit, but what I'm trying to say is, I don't know what it takes to have people pay attention. I really don't know. I know that Guineith has written several absolutely brilliant novels, world class, and it's tough for her to get traction. If I wanted to get an advertiser for USA Prepares, I don't think I could do it. Now, in the past, I've talked with Fram, the oil filter company. I can talk oil filters all day long. I'm not bragging. I just know a lot about them. I've cut many of them open. I've looked at them competitively. I've looked at, the pros, the cons, and picked the best for us. How many people have literally dissected oil filters? STP, Fram, Penske, Wix, Purelator, Bosch, Lubrifiner. How many have done that? I have. Well, I called Fram and they asked me how many oil filters I had here. And I said, well, I have 47 of one particular model number. For Chevrolet. I have 47 of them. The Finelli farm has more Fram oil filters at our farm in that particular model number than AutoZone does in their store. We have over 100, well, we had at the time over 100 oil filters. I think it's now closer to 200. And yet, Fram is not interested in even coming on the radio with me to talk about oil filters, let alone advertising. I don't know how to make it work. I don't. I'm not trying. I'm not trying to find advertisers. I don't want any. I like it the way it is right now. But I don't know how to be successful. I really don't. Now, I've been trained in it. I've gone to the university. I have 2 sheepskins that say I have passed all the requirements that they set forth to be trained in finance, economics, and 2 schools of business, 2 universities of business, and I don't know how to do it. How do these other companies do it? I think they do it because they have an inside track. I think they do it because they get
track.
Yeah, because they've got
the exact words I was going to say. Inside track.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I mentioned your book, did I say anything that was incorrect? Would you consider your writing as good as anybody else's in the upper echelons of words on paper?
I would consider my writing as good as Robert Louis Stevenson.
Yeah.
That's at the top of the genre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would too. And I'm not patronizing Guineith. I'm just telling you the way it really is. So there's something really wrong on the planet. Really wrong. And quality is being eclipsed by quantity. We'll be right back. So I mentioned quality is being eclipsed by quantity. I'm going to give you an example, 2 examples, and then we'll talk about how this relates to the mess we're in and past life regression. So I was working on a 2001 Chevrolet pickup truck, 1500 Silverado, and I had to rebuild the transmission. It's a manual 5-speed transmission. And I've never rebuilt that particular transmission before. It's called an NV3500. NV stands for New Venture. It was a venture of a couple of automobile manufacturers. They wanted to build a new transmission. And they came up with this company called New Venture, and this is model 3500. So it's an NV3500, 5-speed, stick-shift transmission. And so I needed some details about how to rebuild the transmission. I looked on the internet and I thought, okay, well, I'll just get the repair manual. There's 2 brands. One is called Chilton, Chilton, Chilton Repair Manuals, and the other is Haynes, Haynes. Well, I looked on the internet. I couldn't believe the price of a used Chilton manual for that series vehicle. I couldn't believe it. It was like $35, $40 used. And so we work with AutoZone, and AutoZone was willing to sell us a $30 manual for like $20 or $18. So I got the Haynes. And Haynes is thinner, less detailed, less description, less useful, and it would be considered the quantity manual versus the quality manual. Now, Chilton was founded around 1904, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 1906, but right around 1904. Haynes, maybe in the 60s or 70s. Haynes is a British company, and Chilton is an American company. Well, the Chilton manual and the Haynes manual sold for about the same price. But Haynes was in all the automobile stores. They had a display rack. They're everywhere. Chilton is now owned by Haynes. So the second-rate stumblebum of automobile repair manuals is now the owner of the best world-class repair manual. So that's quantity over quality. Another example would be Harbor Freight tools, second-rate tools. The dimensions are not quite right in many cases on Harbor Freight tools. So like a wrench doesn't quite fit the nuts and bolts the way a Craftsman brand U.S. manufactured wrench would fit. But because of the price, Harbor Freight tools just bang those things out, sold them with a lifetime guarantee, and of course you're going to break them. We do. And they just popped up a store, like 2 stores a week, all over the country. There's probably 3 Harbor Freight stores within 60 miles of our farm. So who goes to buy Craftsman tools anymore? Nobody. So what happened to Craftsman Sears? Well, they're done. Because I believe Harbor Freight banged out so much quantity at a lower price that people said, well, I'll just get them. It's lifetime guarantee. Must be great. We have broken 3 so far, actually 4 so far, of their ratcheting breaker bars. I have never broken a Craftsman ratchet. Never. Never. I've never broken an SK Wayne or a Husky, an American brand Husky, or a Proto, or a Champion, Champion spark plug, theirs. I've never broken one. Never. I've had them since the 70s and the 60s. Harbor Freight, we can break them probably within a month each. So what I'm saying is, I don't know how to do it. I can't figure it out, but other people can. My brain doesn't work that way. I would be embarrassed to make a ratchet that broke in less than a month. I would be embarrassed. That's not the way I think. I would want to build the best, world class, and sell it at the lowest price. That's what I would be proud of. So when I look at my life and my ability to deliver, it's not so good. I can't lead. It's impossible for me to lead. And Guineith, I'd like to talk about that because you think you know who I was in a past life. And how do we know? And how do we know? So I've laid the groundwork. Guineith is with us, and so I was talking about, some feelings I've had past life, and I tied them to my current feelings about my present life, and how I don't think I've been able to get people to pay attention. And so was it just this thought that I had in the back of my mind when Dr. Shealy did a past life regression of me that I haven't, been successful? Or am I just continuing the tradition of being unsuccessful? So those are a couple of my thoughts. Guineith, what are your thoughts about tying that all together? You've known me, we've never met, but you've known me for 2 hours a week for years.
Mm-hmm. Yep, since about 2016.
Yeah.
So that's about 4 years ago now. Mm-hmm. And, anyway, when you told me that story, I have a bit of a talent, okay? I used to work as a professional psychic. I used to work as a professional psychic for one of the top psychic companies on the earth. And if I can't name who they are because of the contract that I had with them, but if I named them, everybody would know who this company was because their advertisements are all over the television, especially on the shopping channel and, but Discovery and all these, cable TV channels. And I used to make my living that way. And, worked about 25 hours a week and managed to earn enough money to keep myself. And I had a regular customer base. By the way, if anybody out there wants a tarot reading or an I Ching reading, they can email me at Guineith@gmail.com or teetotalpirate@protonmail.com. And I still do readings for private clients from time to time. I don't get very many of them. It's not a regular source of income, so I regard it as being a hobby. But yeah, if anybody out there wants a reading, then they can feel free to contact me. But anyway, getting back to you, I said, I'll bet I have this talent. I can generally trace people's past life selves in the history books, if they were written about in the history books, that is, if there was somebody who was reasonably famous. When I heard your story, I said, gee, that sounds like somebody whose name actually might have been recorded in the history books. And so I did a bit of digging, and I came across a fellow by the name of John Parker. And as it turned out, John Parker, he felt like he was a failure. He absolutely 100% fitted the profile of the story that you said. He was a farmer. He lived in this little village in a place called Lexington, Concord in Massachusetts. And he was just a farmer. He was nobody special, but he could see that the redcoats were coming, and he tried his best to gather the people so that they would resist the redcoats when they arrived, because the redcoats were doing a lot of damage. And if anybody wants to know the story of John Parker, there's a movie out there. It's on YouTube. It's called, what's it called? I think it's called 1 September Morning, 1776. But if you go onto YouTube and search John Parker movie 1776, then I'm sure you'll find it. Or I think it was something like 1 September Morning. But if you search John Parker movie, that'll probably spit out the result. And it's very interesting, because I researched the life of John Parker, and he actually had a particular health problem, which is something that it's not exactly the same, but there's parallels to your life there as well. I'm not going to reveal any public details. I'm not going to reveal any details or anything like that. But what I'm going to say is that there are parallels with John Parker's life and your life that happened in the past, and so many that it's beyond coincidence. And I said, I've got him. And then I emailed you, and actually, there's no contemporary images of John Parker, but there is a very famous monument to him called the Minuteman statue. And the Minuteman statue was not contemporary with John Parker's life. It wasn't even meant to represent John Parker when it was first made, but it's come to represent John Parker. And it actually looks like you, Vincent, and I've sent you a photo of that in the past. And this is the other thing about reincarnation. When you reincarnate, you tend to reincarnate. Your soul has a particular shape. And when you incarnate into a body, you tend to have that same shape and that same set of features from one life to another, okay? And your personality traits tend to stay the same. Your interests tend to stay the same. Your career choices tend to stay the same. All of the above, because you remain the same soul who you are. So it's pretty easy when you know what to look for to track a soul from life to life to life, okay? An excellent example, and one that was mentioned, and we're actually doing this broadcast because of a phone call from, was it Charles of Iowa? Called in.
Ohio.
I think it was
Ohio. Charles in Ohio.
Sorry. Charles from Ohio. Sorry about that. But he called up and he wanted to know how we knew that we were who we were in our past lives. So I'm answering that question, speaking as somebody who's researched this topic quite extensively and who's worked and made my living in the past as a professional psychic, and this coming into my work as well, and tracing people's past lives and who they were through the history book, including my own. But an excellent example is George Patton, okay? And he claimed to have been Julius Caesar. He claimed to have been Hannibal Barca. He claimed to have been numerous other very, very famous kings and generals in history. And I think also one of the senior, that's right, Marshal Ney. He also said that he was Marshal Ney, who was one of Napoleon's senior generals or marshals. And, you know, and if you look at the portraits of Marshal Ney and Julius Caesar and Hannibal Barca, all of the above, there's excellent images out there of them. Okay, and very, very accurate likenesses. And then you look at General Patton, it's the same face, going down through thousands and thousands and thousands of years of history. Okay, and, yeah, another example, okay, that I will say here that I believe, now, Alex Jones doesn't know about this. Okay, I don't think Alex Jones is a pretty conventional Christian. I don't think he even believes in reincarnation. But I'm going to go out on a limb here, okay, and just this is my opinion from my research. Okay, I haven't told Alex Jones this. I think I might have commented back when he was on YouTube once or twice that to this effect. But in my humble opinion, according to my research, I believe that Alex Jones is the reincarnation of Winston Churchill, okay? Because of the way he speaks, the way he looks, his personality, the fact that he has actually, there are actually films out there, and he has actually admitted on air he likes to smoke cigars. Did you know that? And it's just like, I was like, wow. And just the fact that he has popped up at this time and his whole personality is the same persona as Winston Churchill, but in a new body for our time. Okay, these are examples. And like I say, I don't think Alex Jones even believes in reincarnation. It doesn't matter whether you believe in reincarnation or not. the fact is that I'm actually pretty grateful. Winston Churchill had his faults, okay, but the world would have been absolutely lost if it hadn't been for Winston Churchill standing up against Adolf Hitler. I think there's not much historical disagreement with that. And, this is it. And I did this sort of research with you and saying, I'll bet I can find who Vincent was. And I came up with that you were John Parker. And you know something? I wanted to say this for a while. You feel as if you have been, your life's been wasted and you've done no good. But you've got to remember, John Parker was actually remembered and highly honored. He's actually the mascot of the U.S. Army Reserves. And his image appears on their badge because he was the first one to sound the clarion call. George Washington and all of them, there would have been no George Washington if there had not been a John Parker. And there would not have been even a Paul Revere if there had not been a John Parker. Because Paul Revere was actually inspired and organized to do what he did by John Parker. So although people don't normally think of John Parker as being a hugely important figure in the War of Independence, there would have been no War of Independence probably if it hadn't been for John Parker. The British would have gone from town to town to town to town slaughtering people and nobody would have done anything about it. But John Parker decided that he was going to do something about it, even though he felt like a failure. In reality, the history books record that he was not a failure. Does that make sense, Vincent?
Well, it's quite fascinating. And I looked up an image that you were talking about of Captain John Parker, and there are some similarities. As I look at him, his haircut is the same as mine. He wears in this statue, he's wearing a jacket equivalent to the jacket that I wear here on the farm. He's got his sleeves rolled up of his jacket, to his elbows. He's got contemporary boots on of the day. That's what I wear. He was a mechanic and a farmer, and his stature is the same size as me. Very, very interesting. We'll be right back. So, Guineith, how, for those who, not everybody believes in reincarnation or past lives, so for those who think there is something there, who believe it, how do they know who they were? Now, I've got the image of John Parker in front of me. No one really knows exactly what he looked like, but this is the artist's conception of what this Minuteman looked like. Same size as me, same forearms, same size hands, same rolled up sleeves, same, wearing boots, combat boots. There are a lot of similarities. How does one know who he or she was in a past life? Because I'm not sure. I have no idea.
Okay. Okay. I hope the class doesn't mind. I'm going to use myself as an example here. Okay. I've been able to trace my own past lives, quite a number of them, and I had dreams from when I was a little girl, and I used to dream at night of going into a vast underground network of tunnels and chambers, and it wasn't a terrifying dream. It was like an exploration. I wouldn't say it was fun, but it was something that I did. And I couldn't make hide nor hair of this dream, okay? And I didn't know what it meant. And then probably about 2 weeks before I found one of my past life selves, I came to the end of that dream, and I went up a set of stairs, and I came out of this tunnel in the back of a chimney, and this chimney was in a manor house. And this manor house was vast, and it was full of all sorts of secret tunnels, like hidden panels with tunnels behind them, where you could go from one side of the house to the other without using the main rooms and hallways. Okay, so it's like secret panels, and then you'd push the panel, and then you'd go through into another room. And that was the last time that I had that dream, and that was in 2018. And 2 weeks after I had that dream, I was researching, and I found out about Lady Catherine Ferrers. Now, the story of Lady Catherine Ferrers is very well known out there in the area of highwayman law, LORE, and mythology. But this goes back further than this. I'd had these dreams since I was a child of the secret tunnels and chambers. Okay, that is, by the way, a huge part of the Lady Catherine story, was that she lived in a manor house called Mark Yates Cell, and at Mark Yates Cell, she would go through the back of an old chimney down into a tunnel, and there were tunnels and chambers underneath the manor house, and she would come up out in a forest, and she would get her horse, and she would go and rob people at night. And then she would live as a noble lady during the day. Oh my gosh, when my husband was alive, this was back, he died in 2003, but when he was alive, he was very fond of saying that he was the teetotaling pirate king, and I'll get back to this. And we did a set of past life regressions, and we saw that set of lives. But then we began to sense that there was something more, and so we went back further, and we found this earlier life that we'd lived before we were pirates, and that we were highwaymen, both of us. And that we would live as nobles during the day, and at night we would change our clothes. I would put on men's clothes, and Archie would put on his highwayman's clothes, and we were in like matched clothing, and that we would go and do robberies. And when we investigated at that time, this was between 1998 and 2003, we did these past life regressions. When we saw how many robberies we'd done, we saw in the ballpark of 3,000 robberies that we'd committed together. That was what we saw at that time. I would like to talk about this some more after the break.
Okay. Guineith Isaacs is with us. She worked professionally as a psychic, and this is a result of Charles in Ohio asking us about past lives. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. When I lived in the corrupt Commonwealth of Virginia a couple decades ago, there were gauntlets, there were checkpoints, and the police, sheriff's office, and state police, would have these stopping points, checkpoints. Kind of like, Europe in World War II. Papers. They would have armed soldiers at the roads. Well, in Virginia, they had them for DUI, driving under the influence, checkpoints. And if they smelled alcohol on somebody's breath in a vehicle, they would escort you out and try to force you to have a breathalyzer. Or they would force you. Or they'd arrest you. They would have other checkpoints that would check documents to make sure you had your driver's license on your person, your registration of the vehicle at the ready, and insurance documents proving that you had insurance on the vehicle. If you didn't have those things, your vehicle would be towed away and impounded. And you would have a date with the judge, and you would get a fine. Well, in New York City, there will be COVID checkpoints at key bridges and crossings, according to Bloomberg. Quote, New York City will have vehicle checkpoints at key bridges and crossings and will strictly enforce the travel quarantine, Joseph Facito, sheriff, said. And the sheriff's office will conduct spot checks when out-of-state buses drops off riders at the curb. Test and tracing teams will be on the ground to direct individuals to testing sites and provide education on quarantine, the sheriff said. The 14-day quarantine mandates that travelers quarantine or test out. Violations of self-quarantine will be enforced, and many carry fines of $1,000 to $2,000, according to the mayor's office. The city will enforce the completion of traveler forms at airports, Penn Station, and the Port Authority bus terminal. There will be self-test site teams on site. So, we have arrived. Checkpoints to make sure that you haven't violated the ordinances by the city of New York. I just want to let you know. I know that's outside the scope that we were talking about, but it's important information for you to have. And right now, I saw a map of planes in the air. As of yesterday at noon, there were about 7,000 airplanes bringing people to places that they don't have to go across the country. The interesting thing will be what happens in a couple weeks. What happens? These people absolutely, positively feel it's necessary to hop on an airplane to go see some people in their family, probably, for Thanksgiving. Nobody's working. What's wrong with, in a couple weeks, getting in the car and going there? What's wrong with that? No. They have to get in one of these aluminum tubes and with the recycled air. That's what they've got to do. Because they've been told that it's all safe. I can't believe it. I just can't believe how dumb we've gotten so quickly. And just to let you know, about 60 years ago, actually 61, there's a guy by the name of Nikita Khrushchev. And he was at the head of the USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. He said, quote, this is September 1959, quote, your children's children will have, let me start over. Let me do this. You know, if you hit Control and plus, you will enlarge the text on your screen. Did you know that? So you hold down the Control key and hit the plus key. And each time you do it, the text will become larger. Okay, his quote. Your children's children will live under communism. You Americans are so gullible. No, you won't accept communism outright, but we will keep feeding you small doses of socialism until you will finally wake up and find you already have communism. You will not have to fight. We will not have to fight you. We will so weaken your economy until you will fall like overripe fruit into our hands. The democracy will cease to exist when you take away from those who are willing to work and give to those who would not. That's what he said. And that came from Stephen Hewer as an email to me this morning, and I remember it. I remember it because I was alive in 1959. And Nikita Khrushchev met at the Security Council of the United Nations in New York City. Why was it built there? Because that's where David Rockefeller gave the land, I believe it was David Rockefeller, gave the land to the UN. He owned the land. Or he facilitated them moving in to New York City. So I just wanted to share that. Guineith, we were talking about past life regression. Do you have any comments about what I just said?
Yeah, I think that we're in a whole lot of trouble. I really, really do. Here in Victoria, it's going to be much worse than it was in America, or is going to be in America, because we did something very stupid a number of years ago. We gave up all our firearms. So that was an incredibly stupid move. And all I want to say to the Americans is, whatever you do, do not give up your guns. If you have unregistered firearms, don't feel guilty about it. Don't register them. Don't feel the need to go and hand them in or whatever just because some incident happens in your neighborhood. And know that any incident that happens is 99 times out of 100 is a false flag. Okay? And it's designed to provoke an emotional response. And the end result of that emotional response is to get you to give up your firearms. And the reason why they want you to give up your firearms is because they want you to be a slave. Okay? And even this kind of ties into back into Lady Catherine, because another key part of the Lady Catherine story is that she loved her firearms. I don't have any of those types of projectile firing devices here. I have other types of projectile firing devices. But I really like firearms. But, that's just it. And it's funny because that they're almost unobtainable here in Victoria, and for me they absolutely would be, because the local blue team hate me. And this is the thing. Lady Catherine, another part of the Lady Catherine story was she hated the constabulary. She really, really hated them, viscerally so. And to the point of where she is recorded as having killed at least one senior constable, okay, where she just flat out went out one day and stalked him down and murdered him. Now, I'm not saying that I am going to do that. That would be stupid. I'm not going to do that. But what I am saying is I understand her sentiment because, and I looked at that and I thought, wow, gee, fancy that. She really hated them that much. And the more I look into the Lady Catherine story, the more I realize that I'm looking in a mirror and I'm seeing myself, actually literally, because there's one painting out there of Lady Catherine that was painted when she was about 13 years old, almost 14 years old, and it looks just about exactly like me. There's another painting which is probably Lady Catherine, and it was painted in London. Lady Catherine would have been 16 years old in the year that it was painted. And this young woman is unnamed, but she's wearing the same jewelry. She's wearing a very similar dress, and she's got the same facial features, the same hairstyle, everything. And this second portrait that was painted at the age of 16, when Lady Catherine would have been 16, she would have just begun her career of being a highwayman or highwaywoman. And you can see in this second portrait, whereas the first portrait, there's an innocence and a light. about this child's face. But in the second portrait, that innocence and that light is gone. The eyes are hard, the mouth is set, and you get, by looking at the face of the second portrait, you get the impression that you would not want to tangle with this young woman. That this young woman was somebody who, you know, with all her finery, with all her jewelry and her dress and all the rest of it, she's gorgeous, but then you look at her face and there's really something quite deadly about this young woman, you know. And the second portrait is not officially acknowledged by the family as being Lady Catherine Ferrers. But the place is right, the time is right, the jewelry's the same, the dress is similar. So I myself say that is Lady Catherine, and I recognise that portrait as being of myself in that life. Now, this is the thing about past life regression and recognising past life selves. Plato spoke about this, and he gave a set of rules. This is a Greek philosopher, Plato. He gave a set of rules for identifying past life selves, where the person will look the same, they will have the same temperament, they will have a similar career path in their life, they'll have similar interests, they'll have the same way of thinking, and they will often have dreams and memories of their past life self. And with Lady Catherine, one thing that I found when I realised that I was Lady Catherine, I saw the picture of Mark Yates' cell, and I actually recognised it from years and years and years before. When Archie and I did the past life regression work, I saw our manor house sitting on top of a hill, and I said, that's my home, and I remember looking at it.
So, Guineith, how would you suggest someone begin thinking about, do they have a past life? Have they been here before? How would you start that process? Because frankly, I didn't start the process. There were several instructors here. It was one of the holidays. It might have been Thanksgiving. It might have been near Christmas many years ago. And Dr. Norm Shealy was in the studio here at the farmhouse, and a bunch of other instructors were here as well. These were the good old days when people socialized. And Dr. Shealy brought up past life regression. And I said, wow, I don't know anything about it. I'd love to know more about it. I immediately lost one of our friends. He threw his hands up, turned all red, and left the room. It's like, I don't believe you guys, you know, you lost your minds, that kind of an expression. Yeah, and that was the last of his friendship with us. He was so angry when Norm brought that up here at the farmhouse. And all I did was say, I don't know anything about it. I'd love to know more about it. Can you tell us more about it? All right? So what happened was the guys were in the studio and the gals were in the kitchen. I mean, that's how it was. And so that is how I first learned about past life regression. But how does one determine whether he or she has been in a past life? And the question is, have we all had them and we don't know, or only do some only have them?
Well, I know that particular past life researchers have said that whenever people go looking for past lives, they almost always find them. Okay? You could, probably a good place to start is think back to your childhood and think if there were any really, really unusual dreams that you had, or little quirky things that you used to do or that you used to think, okay? Like, for instance, there's using myself again as an example, I had this dream where I would see underground tunnels and chambers, and it was an extensive network of underground tunnels and chambers. And by the way, I've been in touch with some historians, or a historian who makes documentaries, and he's interested in Lady Catherine Ferrers, and he was recently able to confirm that there's more tunnels under Mark Yates' cell than what have been publicly acknowledged, that people who have lived there have said that there's more tunnels under the cell than is publicly acknowledged. But I'm not going to say any more about that on air because I don't want to give too much details. I want to respect these people's privacy. But there are more tunnels under there than what is publicly acknowledged. Go back and think, when you were a child, did you have any strange recurring dreams? Did you have any really unusual experiences, like where you visited a place and you were sure that you'd been there before when you hadn't been there before, or you saw something on television? Like, for example, in another past life, I was a fellow called Dr. George Wilson. He was the matelot of Bartholomew Roberts, Captain Bartholomew Roberts, who was called the teetotaling pirate king. That was what I mentioned earlier on in the broadcast. When I was 3 years old, I've actually mentioned this on air, I saw the Bahamas on the Jack LaLanne show, and I remember that feeling of seeing this place, and it was like, wow, oh man, I'm going to go there, you know, and just that I loved that place. And you couldn't say that it was just a resort because and it looked so beautiful because I was living in Rotorua, which was a resort town. I saw resort facilities, you know, from time to time as a child. It wasn't just that it was a resort facility. It was that it was the Bahamas. And I loved it, and it just triggered a whole wave of memories, and at that time I didn't even understand what they were. But
hold that thought. We'll be right back. Guineith has been sharing with us, how do we know? How do we know if we have a past life? Please continue, Guineith.
Okay, and from there, if you can find somebody who's really, really experienced at doing past life regression, such as Dr. Norm Shealy, then that would probably be a good idea. But you'll be astounded how from my point of view, my past life selves have been really active in getting in touch with me. The ghosts of my past life selves, that is, have been really active in getting in touch with me and making me aware of their presence and that they have a purpose in my life and that I am them in this age in a mortal incarnate body. And so there's things that I can do here in this life that, they obviously can't do because they're ghosts, okay? So I have, and on the other hand, I have the ghosts of my past life selves out and about there in the universe, including that they've done things like leave their images on my cell phones, both of them. Lady Catherine Ferrers actually left her photo. She selfie bombed my son. My son was having a selfie session with his cell phone, taking photos of himself. And then there's this picture of this highway woman standing behind him in a mask and in this elegant dress and so on, but wearing a highwayman's mask and a tricorn hat. And, that's one example. And the other example is, I was out photographing some puppies one day because I was going to sell them. And in among the puppy photos, there was this ghostly image of this pirate wearing a scarf and with a scar on his face and all the rest of it. And I was, that was quite freaky when that happened. That definitely got my attention. But you may find that your past life selves actively attempt to get in touch with you for some purpose. And with me, they said in my meditation time, I said, "Why are you here?" And they said, and George Wilson said, "There's a war coming. You've got to get ready. There's a war coming." And when I asked Lady Catherine, "Why are you here?" she said, "The redcoats are coming." And about 2 weeks after that, there appeared an image of the Victoria Police wearing red flak jackets, and they were calling themselves the Public Order Response Team. And that was definitely an oh my gosh moment that got my attention when I saw that. So you may find that your past life selves actively try and get in touch with you, and you should be open to that, because they're not demons, they're not any malevolent force. They are you in the past trying to get in touch with you now for some purpose, and you can guarantee that it's going to be important, okay? But like I say, it's a thing of noticing when things happen. And this is it, was developing a psychic sense, because we're all psychic. Everybody's psychic. But it's just that some people have chosen to develop that side of their nature and other people haven't. So if you choose to be interested in thinking, well, I wonder if I have had a previous incarnation, then you may begin to notice coincidences, you may begin to have memories, or you may begin to have dreams at night of particular places. You may notice that there's a particular course in your life that you've got this particular set of interests, and then you pursue it, and then you find somebody in the past, in history, that basically is you in the past, in a previous generation. And, usually, more often than not, when people have past life recall, there's at least some aspect of it that is spontaneous. So it doesn't surprise me that Norm Shealy, for instance, remembered being at the medical school, knew exactly where to go, and walked in the door and could point out his office. That sort of thing is extremely common, okay? And with me, I was able to tell this Lady Catherine researcher in England, having never been to England, never been to Hertfordshire, but I was able to flat out tell this Lady Catherine researcher that there is an extensive tunnel network under Mark Yates' cell, an extensive network of tunnels and chambers. And it was only after I had said that I read a book, it's called something like The Tunnels of Hertfordshire, and it says that there's and it used that exact words. It said there is an extensive network of tunnels and chambers underneath the village of Hertford in England, in Hertfordshire, which is the county seat of Hertfordshire. And it was built by the Knights Templar during the Crusades. And at the time, those same Templars had control of the cell, which became Mark Yates' cell. And so it wouldn't be surprising that they had also built this extensive network of tunnels and chambers underneath Mark Yates' cell, but that only a few of them have been found so far. But the reason why I know that there's this extensive tunnel network underneath Cell Park, Mark Yates' cell, is because I remember it. And in my dreams, I have explored these tunnels and chambers numerous times. And if I could ever get there, I would be able to find my way around in these tunnels and chambers, because I've seen them many times. This was a recurring dream that I had all through my childhood and even into adulthood. Like I say, the last time I had this dream was in 2018, which was only, 2 years ago. Probably almost exactly 2 years ago was the last time that I had that dream. So that people may find that they have a dream at night which is recurring, where they dream that they are in a particular place with particular people in a particular family setting, and they just need to say, all right, what am I seeing here? Is this the past life thing that I'm seeing? And I want to know more. And they will find that, even just through seeming coincidences, that the pieces of the jigsaw begin to come together. And with me, I say, well, it's like this. I feel as if I have amnesia and I'm remembering who I was. That's how I feel. And sometimes I will just get a flood of memory and feeling and emotion, and I will just know things that happened, and even things that are not written in the history books. And this is apparently very common, and then later on, new information comes to light about this person. And I'm talking about people who are known in historical records, and not everybody who has a past life will be able to trace their past life self through historical records. It just so happens that in most of my past lives I was a notorious criminal, so my lives were pretty well recorded. And even in this life, I've given my life to Jesus Christ, and I have really, really done my best to be a good girl in this life. But nevertheless, I've had constant clashes with the blue team. Just every few months or few years or whatever, a new issue comes up, and it's usually corrupt police just trying to give me a bad time, and I'm sure they're not even aware of what they're doing. Okay, but I see it as being my karma, and you can't escape it. So, and I was, oh my gosh. And this was actually one of the things that even led to me getting in touch with you in the beginning with USA Prepares, was I had issues with the blue team, and you were constantly talking on your show about how corrupt and awful they were and how we needed to resist them. And I found myself going, yes, we do need to resist them. They are corrupt. They are evil. Yes, we need to share this information with people. And I think that was one of the initial issues that I got in touch with you about, Vincent. But the thing is that life is like a vast tapestry, and you got threads going this way and threads going that way, the warp and the woof, okay? And as you do this exploration, you'll find that you make connections, and those connections, they seem to be synchronicity or they seem to be coincidence, but then you go later on down the track and you find that they have a deeper meaning. Like, here's an example. George Wilson was eventually arrested and tried for piracy. And, after Bartholomew Roberts was killed. And he was put on trial, And it was a really, really interesting trial and actually even just going through the court transcripts of George Wilson's trial, I laughed because I thought to myself, man, that is so me. That is exactly how I would behave in a court of law. And I know that because I've been in a few courtrooms, defending myself on usually trumped up by them charges. And reading the court transcript of George Wilson's trial, I thought to myself, mate, that's exactly how I would respond. That is so me. He is doing exactly what I would have done. He just tied them in knots, and it was inevitable. He was going to be judged guilty of piracy because he was Bartholomew Roberts Maidlot, and there were just so many witnesses. But that didn't stop him from trying to tie them in as many knots as possible along the way, which is exactly how I behave in a courtroom. But one of the jurors,
hold that thought.
In his trial,
hold that thought. We'll be right back. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Guineith, you took it upon yourself to try to figure out who I might have been in a past life. And you came up with the individual farmer, John Parker, who lived from 1729 through 1775. He died at the age of, I believe, 46. And what is it that drives you to believe, if you believe, that Captain John Parker and I are the same? Let me say it a different way. What is your level of confidence that John Parker, the farmer, the militiaman, the mechanic, and the captain, and I are the same? What is it? What confidence level do you have of that?
100%. I believe I've found you. I believe I've found you in the history books of being John Parker, because the tale that you told me, what you had seen in your past life regression, and the tale that the history books tell of John Parker are the same story. It's the same story. It's not even a little bit different. And the fact that he was a farmer and he was a mechanic, and in this life you are a farmer and a mechanic, and just so many little details. Like I say, you can tell you're looking at the same tapestry because all the threads are in the same places. Okay? And this is it. When you begin seeing these interlocking threads through your reincarnation research, you know that you're on the right track. Like what I was going to mention before the ad came in and cut me off was, when I was researching George Wilson's trial, one of his jurors was a fellow called Charles Fanshawe. Now, Charles Fanshawe was a close relative of Lady Catherine Ferrer's husband, whose name was Thomas Fanshawe. And at home in England, Charles Fanshawe had Lady Catherine's portrait hanging on his wall. That is the sort of thing where you know that you're on the money. What are the odds of that happening? And that portrait is still there to this day at the former residence of Charles Fanshawe, who later became Sir Charles Fanshawe and became an admiral of the fleet. But this was before any of that happened. He lived at Valiant's house at Dagenham, which is the location of the only verified and acknowledged portrait that exists of Lady Catherine Ferrers, the one that was painted when she was 13 years old. And Charles Fanshawe, after, trying George Wilson for piracy, after that he was found guilty, he would have sailed back home to England from Africa, where the trial happened in Africa. He would have sailed home to England, and he would have gone home to Valent's house in Dagenham, where he lived, and he would have had Lady Catherine's portrait hanging on the wall.
Gwyneth,
that is the sort of thing. That's amazing, isn't it?
Uh-huh. Let me ask you this. Do past lives prepare us for the present and the future? So,
absolutely.
in the case of John Parker, the farmer, did those experiences prepare me for where I am right now and maybe the future?
Absolutely. Yep. Because you had experiences then that is still in your subconscious and your psyche, and it builds a set as well as the subconscious experiences. It builds a set of epigenetic responses, where if you have somebody coming up to you and giving you a particular scenario, then you are going to act in a certain way based on your epigenetics. And it's subconscious. Like, for instance, if I see police coming up my gate, I don't think about it. I head down there and I go toe-to-toe with them and I shout in their faces and tell them to get off my land. And I cannot help myself. That's an example. And for you probably just knew how to be a cattle farmer, having never had cattle before, right?
Right. That's exactly right.
And then you got cattle and you just knew what to do.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's absolutely true.
Because you'd done it before. Yeah.
Yeah. Just not in this lifetime. Gwyneth, thank you so much.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing your expertise and your experiences and your thoughts and your knowledge. Guineith Isaacs in Australia.